the meeting to order. Shall we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item this evening is to swear in our new police sergeant, Detective Gloria Hatcher.
So this evening we have the privilege of witnessing our next swearing in of our next sergeant in our police department. Detective Hatcher has been with us since 2013, and in that time she's received her master's degree, and she has shown us her dedication and commitment to the department, but also to the organization and to the community. So it is a well-deserved promotion for Gloria, Detective Hatcher, this evening, and we look forward to working and having her as a supervisor for many years to come. Chief?
Mr. Walker, you hit most of the high points, but I'll tell you a little bit about Gloria. Come on up here so everybody can. Gloria's another one that loves public attention. So we'll try to make this as long as possible for you. Gloria was hired in June of 2013, assigned to the patrol division. In November of 17, she was promoted to detective, and she's been there ever since. She got her bachelor's degree from University of Pittsburgh, and she has her master's degree from Villanova University. Gloria is a certified mobile device examiner and certified in computer forensics. Horsham Township has one of the few mobile device and computer forensics labs in the area, so it gives us a lot more opportunities for clearing cases, not only for Horsham, but for area departments. She's also assigned to the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which I'm sure you can imagine what that entails, as well as our Homeland Security Investigations Federal Task Force. So she's obviously very busy. Gloria is going to remain in the detective division, and she will be promoted to detective sergeant. And without further ado, do you have somebody who's going to hold the Bible?
My niece Winnie.
All right. All right.
This is my niece Winnie and my sister Emily.
Here, Winnie. So here's what we're going to do. Let's move this down.
We practiced this, so she's good to go.
You're in charge of holding that. I'm going to try to get Aunt Gloria closer. Come over here, right by the
This is good.
microphone. You got to get closer to the microphone.
They keep rotating.
Thank you. Here we go.
All right, we got this.
Thank you.
Left hand. Repeat after me. I, Gloria Hatcher,
I, Gloria Hatcher,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support,
that I will support,
obey,
obey,
and defend
and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
and the Constitution of this Commonwealth,
that I will enforce the laws of this Commonwealth
that I will enforce the laws of this Commonwealth
and Horsham Township,
and Horsham Township,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will discharge the duties of sergeant with fidelity.
and that I will discharge the duties of sergeant with fidelity.
I do further swear
I do further swear
that I will uphold, obey, and enforce
that I will uphold, obey, and enforce
the law without consideration
the law without consideration
of a person's race,
of a person's race,
color,
color,
sex,
sex,
religious creed,
religious creed,
sexual orientation,
sexual orientation,
age,
age, national
national origin,
ancestry,
handicap,
handicap,
or disability.
or disability.
Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Photos time.
I thought you
Thank
wanted
you so much.
Oh, you can't go anywhere yet. There's photos. Photos.
We took them before everybody came in, so.
Gloria, come on up.
right, our next item is for opportunity for questions and comments from the public. Anybody in the audience have any questions or comments? Come up to the mic, state your name.
Hi, my name is John DePasquale.
You can squeeze it and move it up. There you go.
Got it. Very good, thank you. Hi, my name is John DePasquale. I'm with JD Signature Homes, and I'm just here to make a public comment about the project on the corner of Moreland and Meeting House Road. It's a 7-unit single-family subdivision. We're proceeding with building on this project, but we're having some friction and some issues that I just wanted to bring to the public and the council's attention. This is not intended to be a back and forth, but I just wanted to bring these issues up and we'll address them through the appropriate channels. The first is with respect to curbs at the project. We're in the middle of construction and the houses are nearly complete, and the township demanded that we install permanent curbs at the project. We had temporary curbs because we're in the middle of doing trenching and there's heavy machinery throughout the project. But the township demanded that we put in permanent curbs, and I'm sorry, with respect to curbs, we built curbs as to the spec that are shown on the plans. And the township came to us and said, those are not the right specs. And we said, well, then show us the right specs. We'll take a look at what's right, and we want to build the right specs. And we were never given the correct specs. And we put in the curbs that the plans called for, and the township demanded that we remove those curbs and install different curbs to a different spec that's purely verbal. And to this day, we still don't have the written depicted spec that we requested for the curbs. With respect to sidewalks, this is what I was talking about initially. We made temporary sidewalks available during construction, mostly stone. But what happened was the township came to us and said, you need to install permanent ADA sidewalks. In the middle of construction, we have a site that has heavy machinery. We're digging trenches. We didn't think it was appropriate, but the township said this is something that must be done. And so we looked, and we could not find a legal requirement to have ADA sidewalks on a live active construction site. And we asked for the authority or the source on this. And we mostly got told, do it or it's a stop work order. And so having not many choices, we did it. But we still don't have an authority or source for where that request came from. And it's part of a pattern of demands being made and us asking questions and feeling like we're just having to comply without full information or a full understanding of the issues. The next is milling and overlay. The township's demanding that all streets of the project be milled, final, and overlaid prior to the issuance of any COs. We can't find anywhere that this is a requirement. We have one house in particular that is finished and ready for occupancy and ready for final inspections, but we can't get a final inspection released until apparently this milling is finished. We can't find any condition precedent for doing this milling before issuing a CO or doing final building inspections. And we've actually already escrowed for street repairs. And under the applicable law, the Pennsylvania municipalities, the MPC, it specifically states that if there's financial security provided, a CO may not be withheld if the streets are in a mud-free passable condition, which is obviously the case, since the township's just asking us to mill and overlay a certain trenched area that was repaired. But they're holding a CO for it, and the MPC says you can't withhold a CO, so we're at a logjam with this issue. The next is with respect to escrows. We were demanded to post it's over $650,000 of escrows for only 7 single-family lots. There's no HOA, there's no shared facilities. These are 7 standalone single-family lots. We posted the escrows, but the township is, instead of releasing the escrows as we draw down incrementally, the township is actually taking a 10% retainage on the escrows, which has resulted in us being over 150% financial security when the maximum you're supposed to be is 110%. And additionally, we're not being allowed to draw down escrows for professional review fees or inspection fees. We're not allowed to draw down on that at all. Again, this is not intended to be a back and forth. This is just to make a public comment and let the council know what's going on and let the public know what's going on. We're trying our best to finish this project, and we are finishing it, and these are beautiful houses, and we have residents that are ready to move in and are very happy to move in. But it's been a very difficult project because it feels like at any whim, the township can come up with a new demand that is word of mouth or not on the plans or not in any agreement or not in any ordinance, and we're having a hard time breaking through the logjam. And when people wonder why is there a housing shortage and an affordability crisis, these sorts of difficulties are part of the reason why. We'll take this up with your appropriate channels, but I just wanted to make this public comment. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, I just would like to make a comment.
Sure.
I know that you have been in and met with staff more than once. Staff has been out to meet with you folks at the site because of a multitude of problems that have occurred throughout this development. And many of the things that you've brought up, I've been here a long time, and with all the development in town, I have yet to run across the issues that you're talking about.
Okay.
So I would recommend that if it's a problem, you get another meeting with staff to include our solicitor so that she can explain, or you can agree or disagree on the legal appropriateness of what you're doing. Okay? Now, I know we have one other comment here before you go.
I have a question regarding the sidewalks.
Yeah, sure.
Are you here saying on record that at no point were the sidewalks inaccessible? Or walkable? Or traversable?
During an active development.
Yeah, I'm saying we had temporary sidewalks during an active development.
You're saying there were no 4-foot trenches that existed for extended
People.
periods of time that closed the sidewalk on a public road?
I don't have that specific information.
That's what you said.
I'm sorry, about a 4-foot trench.
So you're saying there were no 4-foot trenches that remained in place for an extended period of time on the construction site on a public road?
I don't know that to be the case. So if you're telling me it is or telling me it's not, I don't know that to be the case.
No, you said it was the case.
That we
never
were digging them.
And then you left them for extended periods of time.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that we left it for an extended period of time.
You did.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't saying that
Are you familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act?
in general.
You might want to look at that when it comes to mandating sidewalks on public roads at all times for individuals with disabilities.
We did,
So
and we requested the information, and we were just not given the information on that act specifically.
Because we advocate for all of Horsham Township,
Of
not a
course.
builder, not an individual, for all Horsham residents that are represented in this community. And our slogan is a community connected. We work to ensure that the whole community is connected, not just people who can go up and down a curb or drive or do whatever, that they can get from one place to another on public roads at all times.
So again, I suggest you schedule another meeting with staff to include our solicitor, and we can get these things worked out.
Thank you.
Any other public questions, comments?
Just to update on our summer reading program at our township library. So we had this summer a total registration of 745 individuals for our summer reading program. They logged in 12,473 hours of reading over the summer. And the events that the library held over the 8 weeks of the summer reading program was 65 different events. And the number of people who participated in the events at the library this summer was 2,242 individuals. So pretty amazing numbers, but also a big thank you to our amazing staff at the library. They do an amazing job, amazing work down there, and they just keep the enthusiasm going, the excitement going, and they did a great job this past summer.
All right, anything else? If not, we'll move on. The next is to consider an appointment to Township Council. As you know, one of our council members, Terry Harmon, moved, so that leaves us with a vacancy. And tonight we are going to vote to appoint a new member. Any comments before we ask for a vote?
Yes. I plan to, sorry, do I make comment before the nomination has been made?
It's up to you.
Yeah, that would be appropriate.
Okay. I plan to vote no on this motion. I do not disagree that the candidate would make a great addition to council. They are engaged and active in the community and care about Horsham. About that, there is no doubt. I know the candidate, know them well. I inquired about the process for an appointment to council, and quite frankly, there is not a process. I was elected to council to represent the residents of Horsham, and yet decisions such as this have been made with no community input or transparency, and I'd like to change that. I wish to propose to institute a clear, consistent process moving forward to open up to the community for residents to express interest if there is a vacancy on council. I also know that people aren't banging down the door to do so, but my hope is that this won't happen too often, but this is the second such vacancy here in Horsham since 2022, so to think that it won't happen again or is rare is foolish. It is imperative that we are prepared and that the community can trust the process we put in place. Beyond a call for interest, reviewing resumes or interviewing potential candidates would help to ensure that we have the best interests of residents at the heart of the decision that will ultimately be made. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have a motion?
I move to nominate Eric Glemser to fill the vacant council seat with a term expiring on December 31st, 2025.
Second. Is this a roll call vote, Mr. Walker? Yes. I'm sorry, it's a voice vote. How can it be a voice vote?
But we can do roll call.
Let's do roll call.
Mr. Wade, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Chunky, how do you vote?
No?
Mr. Whiteside, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
The motion does not move forward. You need the majority of council, and that's 3 members as to vote yes. So this will now take the process of the vacancy board process. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, council has 45 days to fill the vacancy, and then it goes to the vacancy board. So unless there's a change in status, this matter will probably be decided by the vacancy board. But there would be an opportunity for another vote. There is a council member absent, and I don't think we should presume how she would vote.
Okay. Move on to the next item, which is the approval of the list of checks.
I move to approve the list of checks in all funds in the amount of $71.36, and further move to authorize payment of same.
Second.
Seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next is to consider a resolution for the waiver of land development with conditions for the Miracle Field of Horsham, Pennsylvania, 1020 Horsham Road, to construct a Miracle Field in Deep Meadow Park.
Council has reviewed their request at your last meeting, so the resolution is ready for your consideration this evening.
All righty. Then do we have a motion?
I move to approve the resolution as proposed, approving a waiver of land development with conditions for the Miracle Field of Horsham, PA, 1020 Horsham Road, to construct a Miracle Field in Deep Meadow Park.
Second?
Moved and seconded. It's a roll call vote.
Mr. Wade, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Chunky, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Mr. Whiteside, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, next is consider revising the resolution for the approved final land development for RCM VII LLC 853 West County Line Road 22-09-D. Mary, do you have some update for us?
Certainly. After the council imposed conditions when it adopted the first preliminary final resolution, the applicant learned that it was not possible to rent the facility in a way that's good for the township and good for them, with a certain condition that was imposed by the zoning hearing board at the township's request. And that meant that the applicant had to go back to the zoning hearing board and get the condition revised, and also come back to council to get the terms of the approval revised. So instead of a condition that it can't be a last mile facility, or there can't be any half loads into the warehouse, the new condition will read, the site shall not be used as an e-commerce fulfillment center or last mile facility which is characterized by containing a storage function and a direct distribution of e-commerce products to end users, nor shall it be used as a parcel delivery hub or truck terminal. That would be the new condition. Staff recommends this change to the terms of preliminary final approval is consistent with the will of council at the time that it approved the project originally. And in late this afternoon, I gave you a copy of an amended and restated preliminary final approval resolution. That resolution is not different in any way, shape, or form, except that it includes that language in place of the previous zoning hearing board condition.
Well, do you see, even though the applicant asked for the change, do you see that this amendment as actually additional protection for the township?
It actually does have additional protections from the township. The applicant wanted to rent to a different kind of
Tenant.
one with less truck traffic, one with more of a presence on site as opposed to like a UPS facility, which they would have the right to do as a warehouse. But because they're smaller occupancies, sometimes trucks will go in and out that are half full. It's better for the township. It'll generate less truck traffic, and it's definitely preferable
From the staff's recommendation. Bill, do you disagree with any of that?
I do not disagree. I think I agree with everything.
Do you have any additional comments for us?
No, I think it does give us more protection.
Okay. We're good to go here? And do we have a motion?
I move to approve the revised resolution as proposed, granting final approval to the RCM 7 LLC 853 West County Line Road Land Development Plan 22-09-D.
Second?
Moved and seconded. This is a roll call vote.
Mr. Wade, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Chunky, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Mr. Whiteside, how do you vote?
Vote aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, next item is to review our zoning hearing board applications for September. The first is Regina and Lance Merkin, 1000 Oak Ridge Drive.
This is a residential application in our R1 zoning district, and they would like to build a pool in their backyard, so it's an impervious coverage issue. This is Oak Ridge Drive. This is their house. It's hard to see on this plan, but this is the outline of their existing house. This would be the pool area back here. It goes over impervious coverage amount, so a maximum of 20% impervious coverage is allowed in this zoning district. They are currently at 16.3%, and with their plans, they would go to 22.9%.
And does staff have a recommendation?
Neutral.
You've looked at the plan. It seems okay?
Yes.
All right. You good? Mm-hmm. All right, then we'll go neutral on that. The next one would be Svan Amin and Radhika Patel on 1011 Oak Ridge Drive.
This is in the same neighborhood, and this is Oak Ridge Drive, and this is Drawbridge Drive. This is County Line Road. This is their house here, and they would like to put up a fence around for their backyard, so they can also have some security. They do have young children, and County Line Road is right here, so they would like some protection from their children from running out to County Line Road. So, and they show us a white vinyl fence, white vinyl 6-foot fence, and staff would be neutral to that too. And normally, and we do ask for buffering around the fence. It's not heavy, but some buffering to break it up a little bit. And also that it is, they show a white vinyl fence, that it is according to the plan that they show us, white vinyl.
We often approve, or we often agree with these, but is there any site limitations as a result of the fence that we're aware of?
No, no. You can there. It doesn't go all the way to the intersection, and actually, this shaded part we had them show. This is the clear sight triangle at the intersection, and this here is the intersection triangle in their front yard, so it's affecting neither one.
All right. Ellen, you okay with that one?
Yes.
Sean? All right, then we can go neutral on that one.
Neutral with the condition that there be buffering installed to the satisfaction of the township.
We just do it in-house, township staff.
All right, so we good now, Mary?
I'm good.
All righty. Next is Jason Gribshaw, 910 East Welsh Road.
This is in our R3 zoning district. This property is on Welsh Road between Limekill Pike and Butler Pike. Actually, the house, the original house that's no longer there, was moved off its foundation during the tornado in September 2021. And it's been a long journey for this family through decision-making, insurance matters, and they decided to build a new house. At the time, they submitted building plans about 2 years ago to the township. Everything was approved, and they, on their plans 2 years ago, with the larger footprint of the larger house, they went over the impervious coverage. They knew it at the time, and they had plans on the approved construction plans to remove existing impervious coverage to get themselves a little underneath the allocated. The maximum that's allowed is 20%, and their original home, they were at 19.7%. So they developed a plan, which we're looking at. This was handed into about 2 years ago, and they were right on 19.7% with removing some existing impervious coverage. We went out, they are done the house. We went out for inspection and realized that they had not removed all of the impervious coverage on the plan. So they explained that they've changed their minds and they don't want to remove that additional impervious coverage. So that will now put them at 22.7% of impervious coverage, with leaving what was supposed to be removed in place.
Staff have a recommendation?
Neutral.
Looking at the plan, is there anything they could do there? A rain garden or something to collect water?
They do have plans to do, and that we should probably put that as a condition. They've already voluntarily offered to do some stormwater control, but we should probably put that as a condition too. But they've already offered to do that.
Even though it's close, at least in my opinion, we should add that as a condition.
Got it.
Anybody else? Any comments? All right, then we can go neutral on this one as well. Thank you. The last is the Worth Family Irrevocable Trust, 1336 Limekiln Pike.
I think everyone's familiar with the Worth property on Limekill Pike. They submitted and have been very patient. They submitted back in 2023 a zoning hearing board application to the township for special exception for not taking advantage of, but using the historic resource overlay district. The house and the property is a Class 2 historic resource in Horsham Township, so they do have the opportunity and can use the historic overlay district, and they have chosen to do that. I'm not going to repeat, I'm not going to go into a whole lot because their team is here. Mr. Edelman and Mr. Kennedy is here to review their application with you. Before we get into everything too, and our historic consultant, Larry Weintraub from Appel Design Group is here. If council remembers, you approved his contract to work with the Historical Advisory Commission. So Larry's here to give his summary on his report and evaluation. But this was the first time. This was the first time since the historical overlay district was put in place that someone is using it. And our Historical Advisory Commission actually did a fantastic job. They had never been put in this position before for this type of thing. They were unfamiliar with the district, the zoning ordinance. They were unfamiliar with the process. and they were a little nervous. They met the end of last year just as a group, as a gathering, so I could fill them in on things. And then they went out this year for a tour of the property. I spent 2 hours out there, and they toured each and every structure inside and out. The applicant's historic consultant was there, Larry was there, I was there, and then they had, most recently, their public meeting on August 13th. And in your packets tonight is their meeting minutes with their list of recommended conditions for each structure. But I really wanted to they were very impressive, and I really wanted to thank them. None of them are here this evening, but they did a fantastic job. They were very nervous in the beginning, but they impressed me a lot. They're a really good board, really good group of people that came together and did their job as a board. So I just want to make mention of that and then before we got started. So I will turn it over to Mr. Edelman.
Great, thank you, Bill, and good evening. Greg Edelman here on behalf of the applicant, the Worth Family Trust. It's nice to see everybody this evening, and I do echo what Bill said. I think the process has been very cooperative and deliberative through the long period of time. Just so as council's aware, we have been at this for probably over a year and a half at this point. The process started with the applicant coming and meeting with staff on what to do with this property and how to apply the historic preservation overlay district itself, since it hadn't been used before. And since we identified, and this township identified the site as containing a Class 2 historic structure, which actually is the Hannah Simpson home, which was Ulysses S. Grant mom for historic preservation, we decided to try to take advantage of the way the ordinance is written. And I'll use the word advantage because I think it's a better plan. So I also would like to thank Larry. He had some very constructive comments through this process as well. Eric's reviewed it as well. So we've gone through many meetings with staff, multiple meetings with the Historic Commission. We're now here before you to get your informal, questions and thoughts before we go before the Zoning Hearing Board as part of that historic preservation overlay regulation, which requires us to get a special exception approval before it moves forward with land development. Bill, I think you have the slides, right?
Yep.
If we can start with the aerial just to orient everybody who may be watching. I'm sure council is familiar with it, but the first slide shows you the overall property located on Limekiln Pike, 1336. It's comprised of 2 parcels, overall approximately 49 to 50 acres. The second parcel is in the back. The boundary line of that parcel is actually the stream corridor. The property, as you can see, has considerable frontage on Limekiln Pike. The historic structures are lightly outlined in white. That's the driveway, the barn, the house, the spring house to the right, and a tiny garage freestanding behind it. The 2 white lines that bisect the property are the high-tension overhead electric lines. That's actually an easement. It's not a separate parcel, so you can see the entire parcel goes around that transmission tower and comes back on the other side. There are some stream corridors, as I said. There's one that goes on the perimeter of the property, and then another that goes down and bisects the property. So when we were looking at this for historic preservation, we were looking at preserving the structures that are existing and then trying to come up with a better way to do this than what's under your base zoning. And John Kennedy here to my right worked on the land planning, and as part of the township staff's evaluation, they wanted us to look at the overall by right zoning to figure out what type of yield you could reasonably get. And then that number serves as your base to get your density bonus that you get under the historic preservation ordinance. So first you had to determine, well, what's really possible here under the existing, I think it's 1 acre zoning. And then what can you get, and then how do you lay that out? So I don't know, maybe John, if you could take us through, look at the by right plans very quickly, and then show council, which I think they may have seen, the proposed sketch plan of what we're moving forward with in terms of the historic overlay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Kennedy, Principal Kennedy and Associates Planners. This is a by right layout of the property. The property is 51 acres in its total, and it is zoned R2, so the minimum lot size would be 1 acre with, I believe it's a 125-foot lot width at the building setback line. So that's what you see here. This would be a typical lot. So this layout actually has a total of 29 lots coming in here with 2 roads off of Limekiln Pike. These are the historic buildings. They're on a lot which is a little bit bigger than the minimum, but they do all still fit on a lot. As you can see, we've lotted out the entire property. There is no real open space at all. This is the stream corridor that Greg was just describing on this side of the property, on the southern side of the property. There is an associated floodplain with that too. There's some minor areas of steep slopes and most likely some wetlands within this existing floodplain. Now, one of the things that you will notice with this plan is that we have this stream here. We have quite a bit of distance between the road and this back property line here. So we end up with a situation where these lots would have to have some kind of crossing. We have a total of, I guess, 4 of them in this case. And it's obviously not ideal, but they do meet all of the standards regarding the zoning. So in that sense, in my mind, from a planning standpoint, this is a valid by right plan. However, we also did want to see if we could maybe not have any lots with this condition. So we took another look at the by right plan. No, there should be one other one right here. And what we've done, what is really different, is we have brought in a single cul-de-sac on the southern side of the property, and that's where we have a couple lots in here. And then these lots that previously would have had to cross the stream to get to the buildable areas, that is no longer necessary. We could do a cul-de-sac. Other parts of the plan are virtually all the same. This is all the same. Lot number 1 is the same. And this plan has the same number of units, which is 29. So that's what we used as the basis for moving forward with the historic plan. So we would propose 29 lots plus the 20% bonus that the ordinance has. And if we could have the historic plan, Bill?
Yep.
So this is what we're actually proposing. Everything that you see in green would be preserved in permanent open space. The historic buildings are on a lot that is a little bit over 3 acres right here. And then we have 34 other lots, new building lots, which are located in this area. One of the things that we tried to do was not just preserve the structures themselves, but also try to preserve the context of the structures. And we tried to do that by surrounding it with as much open space as possible. So you'll notice that this frontage here is all protected open space. Also, we have additional open space here. This varies a little bit in terms of the setback. The shortest one is 100 feet, and so this is 100 feet here. This is 140 feet here. This is about 115 feet here. So we get a little bit of a kind of layering effect by moving the open space in and out. And then, of course, when we get here, when you also incorporate the historic resources, virtually this area of frontage has very little change from the way that it would look today. In addition to preserving the open space, which is a total of 26 acres or 52% of the site, and that's everything in green. We also are proposing a trail easement, which you can see coming down here and would come here to hopefully join up in the future with township land down in this area. And I think there's some connection possibilities up here. So we think that it would provide an enhancement of the township's existing trails and would also preserve a very, very large chunk of open space. One of the unique aspects of this ordinance is it doesn't necessarily have a set of typical criteria in terms of minimum lot size, minimum lot width. It simply refers to a percentage of increase in density and percentages of decrease for some of the standards. So we did go through a number of different plans in meeting with staff. And so what we came up with was the new building lots are all, they have a minimum of 17,325 square feet. They have a minimum width of 100, which again, the underlying zoning would be 125. So it's actually just a small decrease in the width. And the actual, if we exclude the historic reservation lot, the average lot size here is just over 19,000 square feet. So we tried to make the lots as big as we could, also trying to save significant open space that would be really meaningful, also creating this trail corridor here, but most importantly, we're able to preserve these on a reasonable size lot by their own, but also surrounded by all this open space here.
And a couple of things to add to what John had said, which obviously is a lot of extensive thought here. Staff had reviewed this. We originally came in with smaller lot sizes on this plan, and one of staff's comments was, well, if you're expecting to add pools and patios to these, you want to make sure they're large enough. So we then looked at other developments in the township to find this lot size, the happy medium of the 17 to 19,000 square foot lot size. So that way these lots will be able to accommodate what we all reasonably expect to occur to be constructed on the building lots. Also, we were looking at a way to make sure that you had good sight distances coming out of the property. So adding the additional setbacks helps. You will have the two entrances on Limekiln at pretty relatively flat locations. The sight distance is quite good. We did run and prepare a traffic study that was reviewed already by your township professionals. It shows very minimal increase, I think 37 p.m. peak new trips, which have very little impact to the intersection at Lower State and Limekiln. Post-development will operate in levels of services A or B. So from a traffic standpoint, it really doesn't have much impact to the roadway as well. I think there was also some discussion with respect to accessing the open space on the other side of the property. So we did, between lots 13 and 14, already start proposing some of those finer details, which are, I think, you get into more during land development, but we wanted to make sure they were possible and still maintain what we're being shown here. In terms of the density number, I think we were permitted to have more units than what's shown. I don't remember what the number was.
I believe we were.
41, I thought was the number.
I think that was our initial calculation.
Right. So we don't have the maximum density here using the density bonus, obviously because of the area that we were trying to develop in without impacting any of the natural resources on the property. So the idea here was to keep everything in the area that's being farmed. So there's very little areas of tree or woodland that will be cleared here, and you're not impacting any of the stream corridors, floodplains, or other environmentally sensitive locations, other than when you're potentially putting the trail in on the other side, which we obviously have a lot more flexibility depending upon how you want to construct the trail in the future. I think Mr. Walker was also talking at one point about a potential actual signal crossing for the trail. So when we get into land development, we can start to look at some more of those finer details as well. But in our estimation, this is a much better plan than what you get by right. I think there's public benefits with the open space and trail system and not impacting any of the natural resources on the property. So we believe that this really accomplishes the purpose of what was intended on the historic resource overlay, and that was to incentivize preserving the structures, which is what we're doing here. I think the minutes reflect what the Historic Commission has recommended, which is acceptable to the applicant in terms of preserving the structures, preserving the house, preserving the barn, preserving the spring house. The garage may actually not survive, and that really wasn't very historic, and Bill will testify to that. It looks like you can kind of just push it over at this point. But the house and the barn, obviously, and the spring house, they're very important, so they're going to be preserved. And then preserved in perpetuity via a facade easement on the house and the barn as well. So we're hoping that this is the balance that council always intended under this ordinance, and we just think that this is a much better plan than what you would otherwise get from a by right version of this plan.
Well, from my perspective, it looks like you accomplished what you set out to do, and I really applaud the way you went through the process to get here.
Thanks, Bill.
Before we go too much further, Bill or Mary, do you have any comments or conditions or anything that we need to apply here?
I think Bill has some conditions. I would just comment that historically, when council looked at adopting the historic ordinance, your goal was to stop the demolition of historic houses when new developments went in. And the ordinance, and to give an incentive to do that, the ordinance provides a 20% density bonus, but then also requires that the historical structures be restored. And that's, I think that's what the if you said you were willing to accept the recommendations of the.
Yes, and those conditions are, I think, more focused on preservation with a little bit of structural restoration. And that's a very good balance because it makes it economically feasible. We have talked, as Larry might tell you, that we've talked about the difference between preservation, conservation, and then bringing it back to what its original structure looked like. And that's
I don't think we use the word restoration at any point, but
right.
It's to keep the structure alive. And
that's correct, right. Conserve it is really where we're going. But yes, those recommendations are acceptable. And as Bill had said, I think the process was a really good process, collaborative among everyone involved.
Yeah, I think it's a very good. I echo, as this is the first large property with the Class 2 resource utilizing the historical overlay district. And the benefits, usually I think council is well aware of the staff's position when you're in the R2 area. It's 1 acre. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's 1 acre. This is a unique property and an opportunity for us to save. It's not on the National Historic Registry, but to us locally, it's very important. The house is very important. And I know the 3 daughters are here.
Yes.
And I know it's important to them too. So it's an important piece of our history, of their family history, that we want to make sure it's conserved and preserved. And not only is this plan has its historical benefits, you can, as Greg pointed out, the stream corridors, so important today, so important, water quality. We have to protect them. It'll be my recommendation also. Normally, we do not, in this situation, we leave all this to a homeowners association. It's too important. This plan is too important. That it would be the staff's recommendation when you get to land development that we take dedication of the open space to protect that corridor, that creek. But also the open space, that 52% of the property, where they could be building 41 homes, they're going to be building 34. The trail connection, I have another map to show you, because just it's what could happen in the future at this location. Whoops. So So here's our Chestnut Creek Horsham Hawks football fields, Lower State Road, the parking lot. Our property goes all the way out to Limekill Pike. So this trail that gets built, you know, we could take it all the way to the back of their property to where we can. I know there's the creek back there, but where we can stop. And then in the future, you know, we could follow the creek corridor with the Kohler Farms and take it out to County Line Road. And then if we can get ourselves down to Chestnut Lane, you see that white sidewalk over there? Well, right around that bend, that sidewalk goes off onto the Warrington Township trail system. And that trail system can take you to Street Road in Warrington Township. It takes you to the Bradford Reservoir in Warrington, and it takes you to their lower Nike Park in Warrington. So, you know, here's an opportunity with some vision for the connectivity, walkability, bicycling. You know, it leads, you know, to many opportunities in the future. So I think, you know, this plan, I said historically, I said environmentally, open space, but also from a recreation point, it is lots of benefits with this plan. So that's, I know we started to talk about the structures a little bit, not too much. Larry's here. Larry, you have to say something. I brought you out tonight. You know, Larry has been awesome with our Historical Advisory Commission and the staff. This is, again, something new that was to us, to the township, that was never utilized. And Larry was recommended to us and has done a really nice job working with our board and with staff and getting us, and the applicant, and getting us to this point. So I want to give him a little time this evening too, and you also got a copy of his report in case you had any questions of Larry.
Do you want to open?
Yeah, I'm going to, while you introduce yourself, I'm going to.
So I'm Larry Weintraub. I actually come from Plumstead Township.
Can you make the mic a little closer?
At Plumstead Township, and I worked with Kelsey Harris as I serve on the zoning board, zoning hearing board for Plumstead Township. I've been a preservation architect for almost 40 years, and so this kind of evaluation is something I do often. For these buildings, I should say, can you go on the bottom right? There's an icon next to sort of the 100% thing, the left of that, which will bring you left.
Oh.
Will give you full screen. There you go. So, which is what's most common with properties like this is that the house gets the most maintenance, the most care, and the outbuildings less so. In this case, the barn had the least amount of care. But one good thing, if you go to these slides, we can see the general appearance. You can see the house on the left is the view from Limekill Pike. The distance is probably several hundred feet, if not more. Maybe standing about 100 feet from the house, and likewise 100 feet on the south side where you can see the spring house in the lower front corner. And then next slide. You can see the garage, which sits to the side of the house in the back, and then the barn up to the northeast part of the complex of buildings. The barn needs a lot of work. I should say, though, that the family did do a bit of work probably about 30 years ago and re-roofed the house and re-roofed the barn, which I will say has so far saved the barn. But the barn needs the most amount of work. There's a couple ways to think about preservation and conservation and restoration. And I know you were saying, Mary, that the ordinance doesn't necessarily say, you know, restoration. But in my report, I sort of recommend conservation, preservation, and/or restoration. In some ways, I see the barn as an opportunity to do a full restoration because it needs to be completely rehabilitated. But I don't think it's necessary in a sense. Being that the house is so far from the road, the whole complex of buildings, the view of them is somewhat obscure in the sense that people driving by cannot see the finer details. And in that sense, I sort of take an easier approach to restoration. And in this case, I would recommend more of a preservation or conservation approach. The house and the garage that you see in the foreground are currently fully encapsulated in vinyl and aluminum siding materials. One good thing about them is not just that they provide a maintenance-free aspect, but they actually conserve the original materials that are underneath. And so my feeling is by putting a conservation easement on these structures, it means that the Historical Advisory Commission can in the future, under a future buyer, determine, if a permit is pulled to do any work, kind of determine what should appear there, what should happen to these buildings. I think that, let's say the aluminum siding stays, it may stay forever. But if a future owner decides to remove any of it, the Historical Advisory Commission could say, we want you to restore the original woodwork that's underneath. So there's ways to approach it in that sense. As you can see, the garage in the foreground, we believe it's about 100 years old. It probably was built for the family's first automobile, which would have been an impressive thing, not to have to park it in the barn. I don't think people in that era actually thought about that cars should go in a barn, that they were preeminent objects that needed their own special building. But this was not built very well, and it's in fragile condition. It's neither plumb nor square, and it has a failing foundation. So my feeling is it doesn't necessarily need to stay or be recreated. I think for the development to sell this property to a future buyer, that a buyer should be able to put an addition on the house that would include a modern, amenity type garage and mudroom and so forth, but that it should look historic in appearance. And I think that's the reason to have the easement on the facade of the house, is that the Historical Advisory Commission can help kind of guide where this garage goes, how it is or is not connected to the house, and what it should look like. So I think that's the way to go for there. The spring house is in, if you go back the slide, the spring house is in fair condition. It was originally fully stuccoed. The stucco has kind of deteriorated, which is okay. Some people like it looking that way, or they might want to restore it. I think all the masonry on these buildings needs to be repointed. There's a lot of deterioration in certain places, and there's a mix and match of different mortar materials that are not necessarily compatible with the stonework in the original mortar. We've learned that the spring house has a newer roof that was installed some years ago when part of a tree fell on the structure. So the green metal roof is not original, but I think it's fine. It's a metal roof, which may have been put on the building at some historical time, not this particular metal roof. The building probably originally had a shingle or shake kind of cedar roof. You can see the house. The shutters are starting to go. We learned that they are the original shutters. And you can see this one is falling apart. I think they were in storage for a while. They were put back on in some recent years, but they need to be conserved. So in our recommendation, we're saying to remove them and store them, and a future owner may restore them and put them back, or recreate them and match them. So I think that's a good idea. There's just some minor things on the house. The chimneys were originally exposed brick, and they were stuccoed at some point. The stucco needs repair. The roofing material itself, as I said, is about 30 years old. It should be replaced in the next 10 years or so. The Historic Advisory Commission would have the opportunity to help select what kind of roofing material is put on that actually would be more historic in appearance. There's very little of real wood that's still exposed. The dormers here and the windows are the original woodwork. Most generally, any exposed woodwork needs to be prepared and painted. We've learned also that this porch used to be open, and it was enclosed in more recent years. As this is the principal view from Limekiln Pike from the south, it is a little disappointing to me as preservationist that the porch is enclosed, but it is what it is. I think if someone were to add an addition and reconfigure the house inside, there may be an opportunity to reopen that porch. So like I said, there's a lot of things that could be done with a future owner, and fortunately the Historic Advisory Commission with their recommendations can have these facade easements and steer that along. The barn, like I said, is the biggest issue. The siding is really deteriorating, and there are a lot of boards. I actually have so many slides and pictures, but we're not going to show them because it's a lot to see. From this view, it actually looks okay, but the boards are original. They were painted once, and all the paint is long gone. A lot of the boards, the gaps between them are large now. On the other sides, there are boards that are missing, as you probably can see in the documents I prepared. The main wood sill plate of the whole structure is failing in many places. It's very deteriorated. The other issue is that there are no gutters on the barn. They didn't typically do that with sort of outbuildings like this. But what happens over time, of course, is that water settles on these long sides. And right now, the way the grading is, this area has received a lot of water over the years, and it actually has undermined the foundation wall on this side in such a way that it's out of plumb, which has caused this entire wall plane to kind of come out at the bottom. It's kicking out at the bottom. This is why I'm recommending that a historic structural engineer really look at this building carefully and determine some remedial measures just to stabilize the structure. The trusses inside are actually in pretty good condition. I don't see a catastrophe happening, but I do think that these repairs, especially along this side here, need to happen sooner than later. And I recommend that any missing boards be put back. And honestly, I would suggest encapsulating everything in metal siding, at least as a temporary measure. It could even become permanent to save this building. The expense of replacing all this siding is extraordinary, but doing an encapsulation would be a much more reasonable method to save it and conserve what's underneath. And as we said, this is so distant from the road that people wouldn't really see the details. But from a distance, it would look preserved, and I think that's the most important thing. There's one major detail which we can't see in this picture, but there's a window on this side up top which is really deteriorated, and I recommend that that be replaced. It's important to the sort of architecture of the building. And that's about it. I really enjoyed doing this. Like I said, in the report, there are a lot of recommendations. It's basically like a maintenance and conservation manual for whoever is to buy this set of buildings and what they might do with it. Any questions?
I'm going to be responsible for communicating the Historic Commission's recommendations to the Zoning Hearing Board. I note that you talk about doing some stucco work, I think, on the chimney. Would you recommend that that be done with lime instead of concrete?
Right, it's all in that report, yes. So, honestly, my recommendation would be to remove the stucco and repoint the brick and put the appearance of the brick chimneys back the way they were. However, if stucco should be applied, like you're saying, they should actually remove all of the current stucco and replace it with a lime-based stucco. Because I believe that you're correct, that the stucco that's on here is probably a modern Portland cement-based stucco, which is
Portland
incompatible.
Cement is
it's
the worst
incompatible
thing you can put
with,
on a historic house.
Right. So I would certainly recommend that, but I would rather go, if you're going to go to that trouble of removing the Portland-based cement, I would actually just repoint and restore the brick.
And we, of course, would like the flexibility of either option. So the stucco, I think, would be a good option. I agree that you can't just put the old stucco back up. You'd have to re-stucco. But the way we envision the process is you either have to re-stucco or go back to your original, to your original restoration form. All of this has to be done in concert with the Historic Commission's review and approval. So we'd like the options listed, and then we go back to the Historic Commission, and they have to review and approve all of this. So it's part of the facade easement that we would obviously work on in terms of the language, that any changes to the buildings would have to go through the review process.
The report recommends either method of restoring the chimneys.
We're only talking about the chimneys here. We're not talking about the whole, we're not talking about repointing the whole, tearing off the siding and repointing the whole house. But,
no,
so
that's just the
I don't
three
think
chimneys.
it's a big ask to use the correct materials so that it lasts more than 30 years.
Right, and I'm not saying not to. I'm saying that stucco could be a correct material. It just has to be the right type of stucco. Or it could be repointed as brick.
Correct.
Right. We're saying the same thing. There was one other thing that I don't know if anyone touched on, and if we could go back to the site plan, one of the things that I think everybody agreed was important was to install significant buffering at the edge of the historic lot so that the context, I don't know, John, if you have your pointer. Yeah. Yep, and then down right in that area so that the historic lot itself could stand on its own without seeing and intermixing with the new homes. So we thought that adding since there's no longer going to be a farm field behind it, it's better to have the natural vegetation to separate the two. So I think that was one of the conditions that the Historic Advisory Commission recommended underneath the last bullet point in their minutes, landscaping and buffering. It says buffer the side and rear property to buffer the historic property from the new development, also to include possibly a fence.
You would agree to?
Yes, that's correct. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Get that one, Mary?
Sure, Bill, I'll do it. I'll do it very quickly. That's the last bullet point in the Historic Advisory Commission's recommendations was to have landscaping and buffering at the side and rear of the historic lot so that it would be separated from the new development, and possibly a fence, but we'll see. I don't know if you do a fence around this property or not.
And I apologize for taking council's time on this, but this isn't simply a matter of taking this page and a half of recommendations and shipping it off to the zoning hearing board. The real condition, from what I'm hearing us say, is that the applicants will continue to work with the Historical Commission to restore the building as required by the ordinance. Examples of preservation, conservation items are found in this document, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
I think this is the guiding document, and then the details come later. Because this is what we all talked about and collaborated on in terms of what we'd be looking at, so that we all would have a defined set of parameters from which to move forward on, and then bring the details in as the structures are being restored, conserved, or preserved.
But when I looked at this, questions popped into my mind, like Portland cement versus lime.
Right.
And when those questions come up, what will be the authority that decides the answers to them? And my first thought was it would be Mr. Weintraub's report. But I don't know if you had another idea, if there's something else you talked about.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily would be Larry's report as if that's the guiding document. That one had lots of different recommendations, whether you have a minimalistic or a moderate approach. There are multiple approaches. I think it has to go back to the review process with the Historic Commission for them to issue, and then come to council if there's any disagreement between the applicant and the Historic Commission.
That's a process that'll work. Right?
Yeah, and this Historic Commission was really fair, and they were open to ideas, and I think they're just very happy that somebody's moving forward with preserving a structure as opposed to tearing it down. So we'll figure out a way to make it work. The barn, as Larry said, I think is the one that everyone is trying to figure out what really needs to be done. That one has a structural question, so that will require addition analysis by the structural engineer and then come back to the Historic Commission and say, here's the report, here are the options, here's what we'd like to do, what do you think? We'll have to have more discussions on that.
Just have a quick question, and I want to thank the Worth family for pursuing this option because it's been a long road and all of the work that you've put into it as well. When you were speaking, Mr. Weintraub, you were indicating certain things that the new owner of the home who's moving into the home would be responsible for, but I believe we're talking about these things as conditions that you will be responsible for before it's occupied. Is that accurate?
I think it could go either way. It depends on what's going to happen with the future developer of the property. Is the developer going to undertake these improvements and then resell the property? Or are they going to develop the property and then resell the historic home to somebody else who wants to develop it? But the conditions should be consistent, obviously.
Sure.
So whoever's doing it has those clear, demarcated lines of what's expected of them, so they know going in.
So, but the order of events would generally be that the developer is then responsible for those conditions, not the person purchasing to inhabit the home?
No, not necessarily.
No. Okay.
It could be either, both, or a combination of the two. So I would think a developer who looks at this would say, how do I make this property the most marketable? And they'll look at the interior of the home and probably want to do changes to the interior of the home. But at the same time, they're going to have to implement a lot of these recommendations to the barn structurally, to the spring house, cleaning it up. So it might be part of it. But then a new owner might come in and say, I want to restore more of it. And that's where Larry's report is very helpful. Somebody may say, I want to expose this, what can I do? I want to add the garage. As part of the facade easement, we'll designate an area behind the house probably. And I don't know what direction that is because when we were talking about that, I couldn't know mine from north-south. So I say behind the house where you could build an addition. And then they'll say, well, what will that look like? And then this process will continue. So
I have a question on that. And Bill, you might want to comment on this. I thought you used as an example that whoever the developer is going to be may come along and say, let's do the restoration or whatever the preservation is on that property before I develop the property. Or it might come along and say, well, let's develop the property and then we'll do that later, maybe sell that to somebody else. Under those conditions, then we lose the leverage to ever have that property preserved.
No, and that's not really where I was going, Bill, but I agree with you. I would think that if there's a developer who's going to develop the property, they're going to have to make sure that that structure is safe, secure, etc. But it may not be fully restored. It may not be fully all these things implemented. They may just go ahead and do the stuff that needs to be done right away. And then the next homeowner may have to come in and do it. We can work these out in land development as to how the council wants to make sure it gets done. But the way I see it is, in all likelihood, a developer is going to come in and want to rehab this property, for lack of a better term, because the value is going to be, there's new homes next to it. We want a new home to sell. We're going to do some of these things. The question is, do we have to do all of them? What's really required on every one? We don't have those details yet. I mean, we just don't know.
I'm good with that flexibility.
Yeah, and the facade.
But Mary, don't we need some sort of a mechanism to ensure that the preservation actually gets done?
Yeah, the facade
it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
They're going to be working on the first step is getting the structural engineering details from for the barn. And then as they go through land development, the things they're going to have to do will become part of the facade easement and part of the conditions of land development approval. And the estimated cost will be included in the financial security that the developer has to post to do the development.
Yeah, we'll have to, the facade easement's key, and timing of when it's supposed to be done will be key. It's things we're going to have to figure out what needs to be done so then we can figure out how it gets staged. Exactly. Overall, but it will have to be done as part of the overall approval, because when you go to record this plan that shows these other 34 homes, the 35th lot's on it. So it's an improvement. I guess that's what you're saying, Mary. It's an improvement.
it's an improvement that's required by the zoning ordinance, so they can't get their land development approval until all the questions we have sitting here tonight have been answered and fleshed out and memorialized in either a facade easement or part of the development agreement.
Right, and what I would expect a future developer of the property to do is during their due diligence or inspection period, they are going to do this analysis now as opposed to later. They're going to have a structural engineer go out and look at that barn and come up with something that they'll know, because they'll want to know what they have to do before they move forward to the next step. So I think it's going to be part and parcel of it. And then when you get to the approval, there's going to be requirements. This whole plan gets recorded at once. The house is part of it. So,
Long as we capture the ability
yeah,
not to lose the preservation, because that's how we got here in the first place.
Right.
Now, I think it's better planned than if you did the by right plan, but we still don't want to lose that.
No, that makes sense, Bill, and I certainly think that's a reasonable approach to it as well.
All right, well, before we move on, anybody else have any questions?
I just am very impressed and happy with the work you guys have done. Thanks for showing us the different iterations that you guys have gone through in order to make this happen, and then exploring a interesting and relatively new approach. It means a lot. And I just hope that if anything happens in the future with the mapping of the trail, you guys will be willing to work with the township to ensure that we can have some sort of walkability.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's when, did I miss you saying that we talked about a crossing of Limekiln Pike?
Yeah, pedestrian crossing
Yep.
on Limekiln Pike and the trail.
Yep.
And the family isn't allowed to throw anything out in the house. It is really cool inside. When we took the tour, there is a lot of history in that house. Newspapers, pictures. I just asked the family that anything that you would like to donate to us, let us replicate. Please consider doing that. That history is important to this community and our township, and we like to preserve it, even if we make a copy of it and give it back to you. But there is a lot of cool things in that house, and I know, and the barn,
Not without limitation, but sometimes it's just a nice thing to pick one or two people from the historical commission and offer them a chance to go through the house and take things like that could be of historical value to the whole community.
Yeah, they've seen it, so
yeah,
they were looking at the articles and the pictures too, and some really good ones. Bill's right.
Yeah.
One last note. Does the design intentionally look like a stained glass window, or does it just look that way to me?
I was thinking a wishbone, but I'll go with the stained glass window. That's
now
much
I'm
better.
not going to unsee that.
It's true.
Have any more? All right, then good luck when you go to zoning. We'll
Great.
look forward to seeing the next step.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time this evening. We appreciate it. Have a good night.
Before we adjourn, I have some announcements. Horsham Restaurant Week is September the 15th through the 21st. The Carpenter Cross Bike Race is Saturday, September 21st, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. at Deep Meadow Park. Horsham Township Eco-Vent is Sunday, October the 5th from 9 a.m. to 11 at the Township Municipal Complex. It's a tree giveaway, e-waste, recycling, and shredding event. And our next Township Council meeting will be here Wednesday, September the 11th at 8 p.m. With that said, meeting adjourned.